You're standing in the kitchen, staring at a half-loaded dishwasher and a pile of mail on the counter, when you hear the front door shut a little harder than usual. A minute later, a voice from the hallway calls out, "Really? You didn't think to take the trash out again?" Your chest tightens, your jaw clenches, and within seconds you're already replaying every unfair thing they've ever said to you, feeling that familiar surge of heat that usually ends with words you can't take back. Here's the uncomfortable truth most of us don't want to admit: the argument itself isn't what destroys the relationship. It's how you fight, how you repair, and what you tell yourself in those 10 seconds between feeling hurt and deciding what to say next. You can be with someone you love deeply and still train your nervous system to treat them like an enemy every time there's tension. You know the pattern. It starts with something small, like dishes, or texts not answered fast enough, or a comment about money that lands wrong. Your heart rate spikes, you start defending yourself in your head, and before you know it, you're pulling evidence from months or years ago to prove your point. You say something sharp, they fire back, and suddenly you're not even arguing about trash or bills, you're arguing about respect, loyalty, and whether this whole relationship is a mistake. Afterward, you feel drained and guilty. You replay what you said, you replay what they said, and you wonder if one of these fights is finally going to be the one that breaks everything. Left alone, this cycle costs you sleep, peace, and eventually trust. It teaches both of you that honesty comes with a price tag. Every disagreement becomes a risk. In this lesson, we're going to do something different. You're going to learn how to walk into hard conversations without losing yourself, how to stay in the room without going numb, and how to speak in a way that protects the connection instead of burning it down. By the time we're done, you'll have a structure you can use when you need to talk about money, sex, chores, parenting, in-laws, or whatever your personal radioactive topic is, without going nuclear. You'll know exactly what to say in the first 30 seconds of an argument, how to slow the pace down, and how to repair things afterwards so conflict doesn't automatically mean collapse. Educational content inspired by classical Stoic texts. Not medical, psychological, or legal advice. If you want steady Stoic focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships every week, this is the channel for you. Stay with me until the very end, and while you're here, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. First, we're going to dismantle the idea that if we were really right for each other, we wouldn't fight like this, and replace it with a calmer, more realistic way of understanding conflict. Next, we'll build a simple rule for slowing arguments down so you don't say things in 10 seconds that you'll regret for 10 days. Then we'll walk through how to talk about the issue without attacking the person, including specific sentences you can steal. After that, we'll look at how to handle those moments when you feel flooded and need a break without making it sound like you're walking away from the relationship. Finally, we'll bring it all together in a real-life evening scenario so you can see how these tools play out when emotions are high and the stakes feel real. In a bit, we'll walk through a Friday night situation where your partner makes a comment about money that would normally set you off, and you'll see how one different sentence, one small pause, actually changes the entire direction of the night. Most people assume the problem is the argument topic itself, but the first big idea here is this: your relationship can survive disagreements about almost anything, but it cannot keep surviving the way you currently rush into them. The shift you need is simple to say and hard to practice. You stop reacting in the first wave of emotion, and you start building in a deliberate pause between feeling and speaking. If you never do this, every disagreement becomes a race to get your point out before you lose your nerve, and that urgency almost guarantees that you'll say things in a tone, or with words, that push the other person away. Over time, that teaches both of you that honesty is dangerous, so you either avoid real conversations or you blow up when you can't hold it in anymore. Why does this work differently when you build in a pause? At a basic level, your nervous system isn't designed to have thoughtful, nuanced conversations while it thinks you're under attack. Your heart rate jumps, your breathing goes shallow, and your brain starts scanning for threats, not connection. That's why you suddenly remember every last time they've hurt you or disappointed you. When you deliberately slow down, you're not being weak or passive. You're giving your body a moment to step out of fight or flight so the calmer, more thoughtful part of you can actually show up. This is exactly the kind of inner gap Marcus was pointing toward in Meditations when he talked about the space between impression and response. This is how a more grounded version of you responds instead of letting the most triggered version of you run the show. So what do you actually say at that moment? Here's one line you can use as your default when you feel that first wave of anger or defensiveness. I'm feeling heated and I don't want to say this the wrong way. Give me a second. If you want something even shorter, you can say, I'm a little flooded right now. Let me slow down before I answer. These sentences do three things at once. They name what's happening, they reassure the other person that you do intend to answer, and they buy you time without turning it into a dramatic exit. Picture this in a familiar North American scene. You're standing in a small apartment kitchen in Toronto, or a townhouse in New Jersey, trying to figure out dinner. You've both had long days. Your partner walks in, drops their bag on the chair a little too hard, and says, "Must be nice not to worry about the rent. I've been stressing all day while you just sit at home." In the old pattern, your chest would flare up and you'd immediately snap back with, "Are you kidding me? You think I sit at home doing nothing?" Within seconds, you're off to the races, pulling in history, last month's overtime, that vacation in 2019, every time they've spent on something you thought was unnecessary. Tonight, you feel that first surge, but instead of firing back, you notice the tightness in your chest. You take one fuller breath, feel your feet on the floor, and say, "Okay, I'm feeling heated, and I don't want to say this in a way that makes things worse. Give me a second." You turn to the sink, run the water for a beat, take 2 slower breaths, then turn back and say, "I do worry about the rent. Let's talk about what's actually going on instead of taking shots at each other." The conversation might still be hard, but you've already pulled it back from the cliff where you both start attacking. Your tiny action for today is simple. Write your own version of that one line and put it somewhere you'll see it. It could be on a note in your phone, on the fridge, or in a notebook you keep by your bed. Something like, "I'm feeling flooded. Give me a second so I don't say this the wrong way." The rule is that you use it once this week in a real conversation where you feel yourself getting triggered, even if it feels awkward. Right now, before you move on, let your body experience what this pause feels like. Imagine someone says something that hits a raw nerve. Feel your shoulders tense, your jaw clench. Then, instead of speaking, take one slow breath in through your nose, hold it gently for a moment, and let it out through your mouth. Do that again, just a little slower. Then, in your normal voice, quietly say out loud, "I'm feeling heated and I don't want to say this the wrong way. Give me a second." Notice how different that feels compared to launching straight into defense. Hold on to this one move, because when we get to that Friday night story later, that pause is the difference between a night ruined and a night repaired. The next shift is about where you aim your words. Most arguments go off the rails not because the problem is impossible, but because you start talking about each other's character instead of the specific moment that's actually bothering you. The claim here is this: if you learn to talk about this moment instead of who you are as a person, your arguments become less cruel and more constructive. When you don't make this shift, every disagreement turns into a referendum on your worth and your partner's worth. It stops being about, "We're late again," and starts being about, "You never care," and "I can't count on you," which leaves deep bruises that don't fade quickly. Why does focusing on the moment work better? Your brain is always trying to make sense of patterns, and under stress it jumps to sweeping judgments because those feel simpler. You never listen. You always shut down. The trouble is, when someone hears those words, their first instinct is to defend their entire identity. They start thinking of all the times they did listen, or did show up, and now you're arguing about the accuracy of your exaggerations instead of the real issue. When you anchor to the current moment, you're making the conversation smaller and more solvable. You're also signaling that you're not attacking the person's core self, you're addressing a behavior or a choice that can change. That's far less threatening, and it keeps both of you in a space where you can actually collaborate. Here's a simple line you can use to keep the focus on the moment instead of the person. "Right now, in this situation, I'm feeling," followed by one concrete emotion and a brief description of what you're noticing. Another variation is, "In this moment, what's landing for me is, this language matters." It pulls the spotlight away from you always and onto "here's what I'm experiencing right now," which is much easier for someone to hear without gearing up for battle. Imagine you live in a small place in Minneapolis, and you're getting ready to go to a friend's birthday dinner downtown. You asked your partner to be ready by 6:30 because parking is a nightmare and you hate walking into restaurants late. It's 6:45, and they're still in the bedroom scrolling on their phone, half-dressed. In the old pattern, you'd stand in the hallway and say, "You never respect my time. You're always making us late. You just don't care." They'd roll their eyes, say you're overreacting, and now the night starts with both of you annoyed. Tonight, you catch yourself. You feel the familiar irritation, but you walk to the bedroom door and say, "Right now, I'm feeling tense because we're running late and being late makes me anxious. Can you help me get out the door in the next 5 minutes?" Your partner might still be annoyed at the reminder, but you've given them something specific to respond to instead of attacking their entire character. Your tiny action here is to practice one "right now" sentence in writing. Pick a recurring friction point in your relationship, maybe something about chores, texting habits, or how you divide errands. Write one sentence that starts with "right now, in this situation, I'm feeling," followed by an emotion and a brief explanation. For example, "Right now, in this situation, I'm feeling alone with the housework because the dishes have been piling up." You're not sending it yet, you're rehearsing the shape of a more grounded way to speak. Take a slow practice moment with this. Bring to mind one argument from the last month where you went straight for "you always" or "you never." See the scene in your mind. Remember where you were standing, what time of day it was, what the room looked like. Then imagine rewinding it. Right before you said those words, pause. Feel your feet on the floor. Take one steady breath in and out. Now imagine you choose a "right now" sentence instead. Notice how your body feels when you picture yourself speaking that way. You're not trying to rewrite history, you're letting your nervous system taste a different way of handling that kind of moment so it's not so foreign the next time it comes around. Another quiet relationship killer is the kitchen sink argument, where one fight explodes into 10 fights at once. The core idea here is straightforward: pick one issue per conversation. When you don't, disagreements become overwhelming and hopeless, because the other person feels like no matter what they address, there are always 5 more complaints waiting. If you never make this shift, every attempt at talking turns into a backlog review of every hurt, and both of you start avoiding serious conversations altogether because they feel endless and unwinnable. Why does choosing one issue help so much? Your brain loves to stack evidence when you're angry. It feels satisfying in the moment to say, "and another thing," because it makes your case look stronger. But from the other side, it feels like being buried under a pile of accusations with no way to climb out. When you limit yourself to one focus, you respect the other person's capacity to stay engaged. You're telling them, "We're going to stay with this enough to actually do something about it." That makes it easier to listen, to take responsibility where it's needed, and to leave the conversation with even a small win instead of feeling like the relationship is one big unsolvable problem. Here's a microscript you can use at the start of a tough conversation: "There's one thing I want to focus on tonight so we don't get overwhelmed." You can add, "Other stuff might come up, but I want us to keep coming back to this one thing." If the conversation starts to drift and you find yourself wanting to stack grievances, you can say, "I'm tempted to bring up other things, but I'd rather stay with this for now." That kind of metacomment pulls both of you back to the agreed focus without shaming anyone. Picture a couple in a small condo just outside Vancouver. It's Sunday afternoon, the kind of gray day where the whole place feels a little dim. You've been noticing for months that you're carrying most of the mental load, tracking appointments, remembering birthdays, making sure there are groceries in the fridge. You've tried to bring it up before, but every time, you both ended up jumping from laundry to money to intimacy to phone time, and nothing changed. Today, you decide to try it differently. You sit at the kitchen table with your partner and say, "There's one thing I want to focus on today so we don't get overwhelmed. I'm feeling burned out from carrying out the planning and remembering for the house, and I want us to talk specifically about how we divide that up." 15 minutes in, you feel the urge to say, "And while we're at it, your texting during dinner drives me crazy," but you catch yourself. You say instead, I'm tempted to bring up other things, but I want to stay with this mental load piece right now. Your partner relaxes a bit because they can tell this isn't going to turn into a 4-hour dumping session. Together, you stay with one topic long enough to decide that they'll handle all appointments and you'll handle groceries, and you schedule a check-in 2 weeks later. Your tiny action is to decide, in advance, what your next one-issue conversation will be about. Maybe it's how often you see each other's families, or how you split chores, or what happens with shared finances. Write it down in one clear sentence. The next time we talk seriously, I want to focus on, and fill in the blank. Then, choose a rough time in your mind, maybe next Sunday afternoon or after work one evening, when you'll bring it up using the one thing I want to focus on line. For a slow practice moment, pause and picture yourself in a future conversation that could easily turn into a kitchen sink explosion. Maybe you're sitting in a car outside a grocery store or lying in bed, both of you on your phones. See yourself saying, "There's one thing I want to focus on tonight so we don't get overwhelmed." Feel how your shoulders drop just a bit when you hear yourself say it. Imagine the other person's face when they realize they're not about to be ambushed with a laundry list of everything they've ever done wrong. That image is planting a small flag in your nervous system. It's showing your body that there's another way to do this besides dumping everything at once. You can't have healthy arguments if neither of you feels heard, and yet most of us listen just long enough to reload. The next move is learning to paraphrase before you defend. The claim is simple. If you get in the habit of reflecting back what the other person is saying before you share your perspective, you cut the intensity of the conflict almost in half. If you never do this, your partner learns that talking to you means being interrupted, corrected, or minimized. That's when they either start yelling to be heard or shut down completely, and both of those options slowly erode connection. Why does paraphrasing calm things down so much? At a basic level, humans want to feel understood more than they want to win. When someone hears their own concern reflected back in different words, it signals that you're not just waiting for your turn to speak. It also gives them a chance to clarify if you got something wrong, which reduces the kind of misunderstanding that fuels so many arguments. From a Stoic standpoint, you're training yourself to step outside your first-person viewpoint and see the situation from another angle, which is one of the most powerful things you can do for your own peace. Here's a simple line you can use. What I'm hearing you say is, followed by a short summary, then, did I get that right? If that feels too formal, you can soften it. So, if I'm getting you, you're saying, and then reflect it back. The key is that you don't add your commentary yet. You're not sneaking in your rebuttal. You're simply letting them know you've received the message. Imagine a couple in a small Chicago apartment late on a weeknight. It's 10:30 p.m., you're both tired, and the argument starts because your partner says, "I feel like you don't care about my job. You never asked me how my day was." In the old pattern, you'd instantly say, "That's not true, I asked yesterday," and start listing all the times you did care. They'd respond by raising their voice and bringing up every time you seemed distracted. Tonight, you do it differently. You feel that defensiveness rise up, but instead of answering right away, you take a breath and say, "Okay, let me make sure I'm hearing you. What I'm hearing you say is that when I don't ask about your day, it feels like I don't care about your work or what you're going through. Did I get that right?" Your partner pauses, then says, "Yeah, that's exactly it. I feel like I'm living my life separately from you." Now, when you respond, you can say, "Thank you for telling me that. I do care, and I can see how my silence looks. Here's what's going on for me." The conversation shifts from accusation and defense to something closer to collaboration. Your tiny action is to practice one paraphrase sentence in a low-stakes situation. The next time a friend, coworker, or partner tells you about something that matters to them, try saying, "So what you're saying is," and summarize. You're not waiting for a fight to use this. You're training the muscle when the stakes are low so it's available when the stakes are high. Take a slow practice moment right now. Think of someone in your life who often says, "You're not listening," or "Forget it," when you talk. Picture their face, their posture, the way their voice sounds. Imagine them telling you one thing they're frustrated about. It doesn't have to be huge. Maybe they're saying, I feel like I'm the only one doing laundry, or, I don't know what's going on with our budget. Instead of jumping in, imagine yourself saying quietly, if I'm hearing you, you're saying, and reflect it back. Hear yourself add, did I get that right? Notice what happens in your body when you imagine them nodding and saying, yeah, that's it. That moment of being understood is like oxygen in an argument. Hold that picture. We're going to use this paraphrase skill later when we drop into that Friday night story. Even with better words, you're still human, and sometimes your body gets overwhelmed. You feel your heart race, your thoughts scatter, and suddenly you're either yelling or completely checked out. The next shift is learning how to take a break without turning it into abandonment. The claim here is this: you have the right to step away when you're flooded, and the relationship has the right to a clear, grounded plan for coming back. If you never figure this out, breaks become silent treatments, and silent treatments become emotional landmines that make every argument more frightening. Why is this so important? When you're emotionally flooded, your brain is not in problem-solving mode, it's in survival mode. You say things you don't mean, or you shut down in a way that looks cold and uncaring. But on the other side, when someone sees you walk away without a word, or go dark for days, their nervous system panics. They don't know if you're gone for 10 minutes or forever. That uncertainty turns what could have been a helpful pause into another form of threat. When you combine your right to regulate with a clear explanation and a time frame, you're honoring both your own limits and the other person's need for stability. Here's a microscript you can use when you're too flooded to keep going. I want to keep working on this, and I'm too overwhelmed to do it well right now. I'm going to take a break for time frame, and then I'd like us to come back to it. You can fill in that time frame with something realistic, 20 minutes, an hour, and tomorrow morning. If you're the one being asked for a break, a helpful response is, okay, I can do that. Let's check back in at time. That way, both of you know this isn't a shutdown, it's a temporary pause with a plan. Picture a couple in a small rental house in Houston on a humid evening. You're in the bedroom, your partner is in the doorway, and you're arguing about how you divide time between families on holidays. This topic always hits a nerve, and both of you have years of history behind it. The conversation has gone back and forth for 40 minutes, and you feel like you're on the edge of either crying or saying something cruel. In the old pattern, you'd snap, you know what? Forget it, and storm out to the living room, scrolling your phone for hours, leaving your partner feeling abandoned and terrified that you're done. Tonight, when you feel your heart pounding and your palms sweating, you say, listen, I want to keep working on this, but I'm getting too overwhelmed to hear you clearly. I'm going to take 20 minutes to calm down, and then I'd like us to come back to it. Your partner looks unsure, but they've heard you name both parts, the break and the return. You step outside, walk around the block, breathe the warm air. You check the time, and 20 minutes later, you walk back in and say, okay, let's pick this back up. I'm in a better place now. Your tiny action is to decide on a default break time and say it out loud to yourself. Maybe it's 15 minutes, maybe it's 30. Say, my default break time when I'm flooded will be, and fill in the blank. Then, share this with the person you're most likely to argue with. You can say, if I say I need a break, my plan is to step away for 15 minutes and then come back. I'm not disappearing, I'm trying to show up better. That's a small conversation, but it plants a seed that will matter when you're both heated. Right now, give yourself a slow practice moment. Close your eyes for a second, if you can. Bring to mind the last argument where either you or the other person shut down or walked out. Feel the heaviness in your chest, the frustration, maybe the fear. Then imagine rewinding the scene. See yourself saying, I want to keep working on this, and I'm too overwhelmed to do it well right now. I'm going to take a break for 20 minutes, and then I'd like us to come back to it. Imagine yourself stepping into another room, sitting on the edge of the bed or stepping out onto a balcony. Take 3 slow breaths in your imagination, in, hold, and out. Then picture yourself walking back into the room at the agreed time and saying, okay, I'm ready to continue. You're training your body to see a break as part of the connection, not the end of it. There's another piece that quietly poisons arguments, the stories you tell yourself about what the other person's behavior means. You see a text left unanswered, a face turned away, a raised voice, and your mind fills in the blanks with the worst possible interpretation. The core idea here is that you learn to question your first story before you act on it. If you don't, you end up fighting not just with the person in front of you, but with an entire movie in your head that they've never seen. Why does this matter so much? Under stress, your brain takes shortcuts. It uses past pain and fear as a lens for current situations. So if someone doesn't text back for 4 hours, your brain might immediately go to, they don't care, or, they're pulling away, especially if you've been abandoned or dismissed before. But as Seneca kept reminding his friend in his letters, a lot of our suffering comes not from the event, but from our interpretation of it. When you get into the habit of saying, this is one possible story, not the only one, you give yourself the chance to respond to reality instead of to your fears. Here's a microscript you can use inside your own head and out loud in the relationship. The story I'm telling myself is, followed by the fear or assumption. Then, is that actually what's happening, or can you help me understand what's really going on? This does two things. It takes ownership of your interpretation, and it invites the other person to clarify instead of defending themselves against a silent accusation. Imagine you live in a small apartment in Seattle and your partner has been distant all week. They've been working late, and when they come home, they go straight to the computer, barely saying hello. In the old pattern, you'd stew on the couch, scrolling social media, and thinking, they're losing interest. They don't find me attractive anymore. They're probably annoyed that I even exist. By the time Friday hits, you're so full of unspoken resentment that the smallest comment sets you off. Tonight, you decide to try something different. When they sit down at the desk again, your heart pounds, but you walk over and say, hey, can I check something with you? The story I'm telling myself is that you're avoiding me because you're mad or pulling away. Is that what's happening? Your partner looks surprised and says, no. I've got this project that's behind and I'm panicking. I've been so in my head I haven't even realized how I'm coming across. The situation isn't magically fixed, but now you're dealing with an actual problem, project stress and disconnection, instead of silently fighting your fear. Your tiny action is to use the story I'm telling myself once this week in any relationship, with a friend, a coworker, a partner, even a family member. It doesn't have to be a huge issue. It might be as simple as, the story I'm telling myself is that you're annoyed with me because you haven't answered my text. Is that what's going on? You're teaching yourself to turn unspoken assumptions into spoken questions. Let's take a slow practice moment. Think of a current situation where your brain has been spinning a story. Maybe it's about someone's silence, a change in their tone, or a shift in their schedule. Feel the way that story sits in your body, maybe a weight in your stomach, a tightness in your throat. Now, quietly say in your mind, the story I'm telling myself is, and fill in the fear. Then add, it's one possible story, not the only one. Take a breath. Imagine yourself, sometime in the next few days, saying that sentence to the person involved and asking, can you help me understand what's really going on? The goal isn't to guarantee a comforting answer, it's to keep you from treating your first fearful interpretation as unquestionable truth. Arguments don't end when the last sharp word is spoken, they echo in the hours and days afterward. That's where repair comes in. The next idea is that every significant argument deserves a small, intentional repair moment. Without repair, you and the other person each go back to your separate corners, nurse your wounds, and quietly build a case for why the other is the problem. Over time, that leads to a cold distance that can feel harder to come back from than even the loudest fight. Why does repair matter so much? Conflict is inevitable, emotional bruises are inevitable. What determines whether a relationship weakens or strengthens over time isn't the absence of pain, but what you do after it happens. A small apology, a check-in, a shared laugh, even a simple, we're okay, right, can signal to both nervous systems that the bond is still intact, even if there are unresolved issues. From a Stoic perspective, you're practicing humility and accountability. You're separating your judgment of yourself as right from the reality that your words may still have caused harm. Here's a microscript you can use as a repair tool. I'm sorry for how I said that. You didn't deserve that tone. I care about you and about us. Notice that this focuses on your behavior and the impact, not on whether your underlying point was valid. If you want to add more, you can say, there are things we still need to work through, but I don't want you doubting that we're on the same team. Picture a couple in a modest home in Ohio on a Sunday night. You had a rough argument earlier about how much time you each spend on your phones. Voices were raised, and at one point you said, "You're addicted to your screen, it's pathetic." Hours have passed. You're on opposite ends of the couch, both scrolling in silence, the irony heavy in the air. In the old pattern, you'd let the night end like this, maybe mumble a good night, and hope that things feel better in the morning without actually addressing anything. Tonight, you decide you're done leaving your nervous system stuck in that tension. You put your phone down, take a breath, and say, "Hey, I want to repair something from earlier. I'm sorry for calling you pathetic. You didn't deserve that. I care about you and about us, and I let my frustration twist how I spoke." Your partner looks at you, surprised, then sighs and says, "Thank you. That really stung. I'm sorry too for how I dismissed you. We still need to figure out this phone thing, but I don't want us feeling like enemies." At that moment, the heaviness in the room loosened a bit. The problem isn't magically solved, but the connection is acknowledged and strengthened. Your tiny action is to think of one argument from the last month, even if it seems small, and send a short repair message if it still feels unresolved. It could be a text that says, "I've been thinking about our conversation the other night. I'm sorry for how sharp I was. You didn't deserve that." Or, if you're in the same house, you might say it in person tonight. You're not rehashing the argument, you're tending to the bruise. Take another slow practice moment. Imagine someone who matters to you sitting somewhere in your space right now, maybe on the couch, at the table, or in the passenger seat of your car. Remember a phrase you said recently that you're not proud of. Feel the small sting of that memory. Then, in your mind, walk over to them, sit down, and say, "I'm sorry for how I said that. You didn't deserve that tone. I care about you and about us." Watch their faces soften a little in your imagination. Even if the actual person might react differently, you're rehearsing being the kind of person who repairs instead of waiting for time to erase what can't simply be erased. A lot of modern arguments don't even happen in person anymore, they happen through screens. Text threads, DMs, and half-read messages can become battlefields. The last key idea before we pull it all together is this: not every conflict belongs in text form, and you need a clear personal rule about when to switch channels. If you don't, your most emotionally loaded conversations will keep happening in the worst possible medium, where tone is invisible and misunderstandings multiply fast. Why is this such a big deal? Text is fast and easy, which makes it attractive when you're upset. You can type out a paragraph, hit send, and feel like you've said your piece without facing the discomfort of someone's voice or expression. But that same distance makes it easier to be harsher than you intend, and much easier for the other person to misread you. A line you meant as neutral can land as icy. A pause in replying can feel like punishment. When you move bigger conflicts to voice or face-to-face, you give yourself access to tone, pacing, and repair in real time. Here's a simple rule in sentence form: if this feels bigger than a minor misunderstanding, I'm not going to fight about it over text. And here's a microscript you can send when a text thread starts heating up: this feels important, and I don't want to handle it by text. Can we talk about it on the phone or in person? If the other person resists, you can add, "I care about us enough to have this conversation in a way where we can actually hear each other." Imagine you live in a small place in Denver and you and your partner are texting during the workday. A joke you made in the morning landed wrong, and now the thread has turned tense. They text, "Forget it. I shouldn't have said anything. You never take me seriously anyway." In the old pattern, you'd fire back, "Wow, dramatic much," and the rest of your day would be spent checking your phone, rereading the thread, and feeling angry and misunderstood. Tonight, you feel your fingers itching to type out a long defense, but instead you pause and remember your rule. You type, "This feels important, and I don't want to handle it by text. Can we talk about it on the phone tonight?" There's a pause. They write back, I guess. Later, when you're home, you sit down at the kitchen table and say, okay, let's actually talk about this, and you use the skills we've already covered, pausing, focusing on one issue, paraphrasing, questioning your stories. What could have been a full day of tension in your pocket becomes an uncomfortable but manageable evening conversation. Your tiny action is to set your own text rule in a way that fits your life. You might decide, if I start typing more than 3 sentences about something emotional, I'm going to stop and switch to voice. Or, if my heart rate goes up while texting, I'm going to send the "this feels important" message and move it off text. Write your rule down somewhere you see when you're on your phone, even if it's just as a note titled "text rule." For a slow practice moment, picture one recent text argument. Maybe it was with a partner, a friend, or even a family member. See the screen, the bubbles, the words that stung. Imagine yourself at the moment when it began to escalate, right before you sent the first angry paragraph. Now, rewrite that moment in your mind. See yourself deleting the paragraph, taking a breath, and sending, "This feels important, and I don't want to handle it by text. Can we talk about it on the phone or in person?" Hear their reply, even if it's hesitant. Feel your shoulders drop a little because you know you've just chosen a path that, while more uncomfortable in the short term, is safer for the relationship in the long term. Keep this scene close. In our Friday night story, you'll see how moving a conflict off the screen changes the whole night. It's Friday night now, and all of these ideas are about to get tested. You've had a long week. You're standing at the stove in your small apartment just outside Boston, stirring a pot of pasta. The TV is murmuring in the background, dishes are stacked from a few days of "I'll get to it later," and your partner is at the table with their laptop open, scrolling through your shared bank account. Payday just hit, but so did a car repair bill and a surprise medical copay. The numbers aren't adding up the way you both hoped. "Wow," your partner says, their voice tighter than usual. "I didn't realize we'd spent this much eating out. Must be nice treating yourself while I'm stressing about bills." The words hit you like a slap. You feel your heart jump, your chest tighten, and your mind instantly pulls up every way you've sacrificed this month. The old reaction is right there, loaded and ready. Are you serious? You're the one who bought concert tickets and that new jacket. Don't you dare make me the problem? You can almost see the argument already, like a movie you've watched 100 times. But this time, you remember the pause. You grip the wooden spoon just a little tighter, notice the way your jaw is clenching, and take a slow, deliberate breath. You feel how badly you want to fire back, but you hear your own voice in your mind saying, "I'm feeling heated and I don't want to say this the wrong way. Give me a second." Out loud, you say exactly that. "Okay, I'm feeling heated, and I don't want to say this in a way that makes things worse. Give me a second." You turn the burner down a notch, step back from the stove, and take 2 slower breaths, counting quietly in your head. Your partner looks up, surprised. They're used to you snapping right away. There's a moment of awkward silence, the kind that used to feel unbearable. You let it be there. After that small pause, you walk over to the table and sit down. You remember the commitment to talk about the moment, not their entire character. "Right now," you say, "in this situation, I'm feeling judged and blamed because of how you said that about the eating out." You keep your voice as even as you can manage. "Can we talk about what's actually going on with the money without turning it into me being selfish or you being the only one who cares?" Your partner's shoulders drop half an inch. "Okay," they say, though their tone is still sharp, "but I'm really stressed." You nod and resist the urge to defend. You remember the paraphrasing practice and say, "What I'm hearing you say is that when you look at the account and see those charges, it feels like we're not on the same page about how serious things are. It feels like you're carrying the stress alone. Did I get that right?" They blink, stunned for a second by hearing their fear reflected back so clearly. "Yeah," they say quietly. "That's exactly it. I feel like I'm the only one panicking." As they speak, you notice another familiar internal move starting up, the story in your own head. "The story I've been telling myself," you think, "is that they don't trust me with money and secretly think I'm irresponsible." You realize you've never said that out loud. You take another breath and add, "Can I share something too?" The story I've been telling myself when you bring up money this way is that you don't trust me, that you see me as reckless. That's been making me defensive before we even start talking. Is that what's going on for you? They shake their heads. No, they say. I'm scared, not judgmental. I don't think you're reckless, I just don't know how we're going to make this work. The conversation is still intense, but something important has shifted. Before, you would have been dueling stories in your heads while hurling accusations. Now, the stories are on the table where you can both see them. You feel another wave of overwhelming surge in your chest as you look at the numbers on the screen. Your mind starts spinning: car repair, upcoming rent, that subscription you forgot to cancel. For a moment, you feel yourself slipping into that flooded state where everything feels like too much. You remember the break plan. Hey, you say gently, I want to keep working on this. I'm getting a little overwhelmed looking at all these numbers. Can we take a 15-minute break and then come back and make one concrete plan for the next 2 weeks? Your partner hesitates, their eyes flicking from the laptop to your face. You're not just checking out, they ask. No, you say. I'm not disappearing. I'm going to set a timer on my phone for 15 minutes, drink some water, and then I'll come back and sit down with you. You show them the timer as you set it on the counter. During the break, you walk down the hallway, into the bathroom, close the door, and lean against the sink. You look at your own reflection and feel the heat in your face. You take 3 slow breaths, just like you've practiced, in through your nose, hold gently, out through your mouth. On the 3rd breath, you quietly say, I'm not here to win. I'm here to stay connected while we solve this. You're not pretending you're calm, you're helping yourself get closer to calm. When the timer buzzes, you walk back to the kitchen. Your partner is still at the table, the laptop open, but their posture is less rigid. You sit back down and say, thanks for waiting. Let's pick one piece of this to focus on so we don't get overwhelmed. They nod. Okay, they say. Let's just look at eating out for now. One thing at a time. Together, you pull up the last month's transactions and talk only about restaurants and takeout, not everything else wrong with your finances, not every past decision. You agree on a temporary spending limit and a simple rule: you'll check in with each other by text before ordering anything over a certain amount. The conversation isn't fun, but it's not nuclear. After you've made the plan, you feel a wave of tenderness and shame at the same time as you remember something you said the last time you fought about money, a few months ago. You're just bad with money. The words still taste harsh in your memory. You look at your partner and say, I want to repair something, not just from tonight. I'm sorry for the times I've called you bad with money. That wasn't fair, and you didn't deserve it. I care about you and about us, and I let my fear twist how I spoke. Their eyes soften. Thank you, they say. I know I've said some rough things too. I'm sorry I made it sound like you don't care at all. You clearly do. There's a small, quiet moment where you both just sit there, tired and closer than you were an hour ago. Later that night, as you're getting into bed, your phone buzzes with a notification from a group chat that's been a source of drama lately. In the past, you would have half-read the messages, misinterpreted someone's tone, and spiraled into another argument about why you're texting so late. Tonight, you glance at the preview and feel the familiar tug, but you remember your text rule. If this feels bigger than a minor misunderstanding, I'm not going to fight about it over text. You swipe away the notification, put your phone face down on the nightstand, and turn toward your partner instead. Hey, you say softly, we did pretty well tonight, all things considered. They smile faintly and nod, the tension in the room noticeably lighter. You don't fall asleep thinking, we're perfect. You fall asleep thinking, we argued and we didn't break. We stayed in it, and we cared for the connection while we dealt with the problem. That is the real victory. When you strip everything else away, this whole lesson has really been about one thing: learning to respond instead of react when arguments show up. So conflict stops being a sign that your relationship is doomed and starts being a place where you can actually build trust. It's about shifting from mindless, automatic fighting to intentional, structured conversations where both of you get to stay human and stay connected even when you disagree. We started by looking at that tense kitchen moment, where one careless comment about trash or money can send you straight into a war you've both fought 100 times. You saw how the first crucial move is to build in a pause, even just one sentence that buys you a few seconds and a couple of deeper breaths so you don't let your most triggered self do all the talking. From there, you learn to aim your words at the moment, not at the other person's whole character, using right now sentences to keep things smaller, more honest, and less cruel. Then we tackled the kitchen sink habit, where one fight becomes 10, and you practice picking one issue at a time so arguments feel less hopeless and more solvable. From there, we moved into listening differently. You saw how paraphrasing, reflecting back what the other person is saying before you defend yourself, can take the intensity down, because being understood is half of what most people are fighting for. We talked about what to do when your body gets overwhelmed, and how taking a break with a clear plan to return is an act of care, not abandonment. You practiced naming your flood, setting a timer, and walking back in on purpose. We also opened up the quiet world of stories in your own head, the assumptions you make when someone goes quiet or changes their tone, and you started using the simple line, "The story I'm telling myself is," to pull those fears into the light where they can be questioned instead of treated as facts. After that, we moved into repair, those small, intentional moments after a fight where you tend to the emotional bruises with a simple apology and a reminder that you're on the same team. You saw how even one sentence like, "I'm sorry for how I said that, you didn't deserve that tone," can keep resentment from hardening. Finally, we brought in the reality of modern communication. How many of your arguments happen over text? And why choosing to move bigger conflicts into voice or face-to-face conversations protects both of you from the distortions of screens. All of that came together in that Friday night money argument in your Boston kitchen, where you watched yourself pause, stay with one issue, paraphrase, question your inner story, take a break with a plan, repair, and choose connection over late-night text spirals. Now it's time to translate all of this into a few specific steps you can actually do today. First, choose one default pause line and write it down somewhere you'll see it. It could be, "I'm feeling heated and I don't want to say this the wrong way. Give me a second," or a version in your own words. Your job today is to use that line once in a real conversation where you feel yourself getting triggered, even if it feels a bit clumsy when you say it. Second, pick one recurring issue that tends to erupt into multi-topic fights, maybe chores, phones, or family plans, and decide that the next serious talk you have about it will be a one-issue conversation. When that moment comes, start with, "There's one thing I want to focus on so we don't get overwhelmed," and keep bringing the conversation back to that one thing. Third, send one small repair message related to a recent argument. Text or say, "I've been thinking about what I said the other night. I'm sorry for how sharp I was. You didn't deserve that," and then let it land without expecting a particular response. If this resonated with you, the next lesson you'll want to dive into is one where we go deeper into how to hold your boundaries without turning every no into a fight, including how to handle guilt, people-pleasing, and those subtle pressure tactics that show up in close relationships. Think of it as the follow-up. If this lesson was about arguing without breaking, the next one will be about saying no without losing yourself. If you want a whole library of Stoic Focus lessons on emotional control, boundaries, and relationships, this is what we do here every week. If you feel messages like this need to reach more people, hit like, tap subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments.